Hello and welcome to another Cloud Podcast, a podcast designed to bring you stories from the smartest minds in IT, operations, and business, and learn how they're using cloud technology to improve business and the customer experience. All right. Well, Melissa Henley, it's so good to have you on this podcast. I've been looking forward to this since our first call that we had together. But first off, good to have you. Artie, good to see you, buddy. How's everyone doing?
Doing really good. Melissa, thank you for joining us. We were just talking a little bit about Southern California and Long Beach and El Segundo and the beautiful weather that we're having right now in April. But happy to have you on the podcast. Looking forward to the conversation and welcome. Thanks, Alex, for the warm intro.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we all get to revel in, getting creative with our workspaces because we're in Southern California. Homes are smaller, it's more expensive. So we're all making do with workout rooms in the garage and the guest spaces. So we're here to win it out here in Southern California. But Melissa,
yeah, you don't know I have my camera very carefully framed, so you don't see the treadmill over here and my weights on the floor. So this is the office/gym.
I just love the sign that says "Keep calm and knit." It's a good way to soothe during those busy Zoom calls where you just click the camera off and you just start knitting something, right?
Click the camera off, have your camera up high enough so you can't see your hands, whatever works.
You can get creative.
I love how we all have stuff in our backgrounds now because we're all in this like post-pandemic Zoom meeting, MS Teams meetings environment where you have to put a little bit of personality there. It's like, what do you do for a hobby? What do you do for a living? You kind of see in people's backgrounds, like what they do and what they like. Alex, I love your surfboard there. I know we've seen skis up there, surfboard. I don't think we've seen, there's a piano, I believe, back there that's hiding. But just all the little hobbies that we do and we cram into our little offices as well. I love it.
It's good. It's good to have some personality to it. So it's all fun. But Melissa, let's put the focus on you since you are our distinguished guest on this podcast. What I'd like for the audience to understand is just your journey to how you got to LaserFiche and how you got into this customer experience world, because it wasn't around 10 years ago, and it's morphed and it's morphing faster and faster, it seems. So give us a little bit of background about yourself, how you got to where you're at, and then a little bit about LaserFiche as well.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I was going to say it is new because at LaserFiche, the customer experience team, it's only about 3 years old. So it's pretty exciting to lead customer experience. But for me, I actually have been at LaserFiche. It'll be 15 years coming up pretty soon. So it's been exciting to, you get to see the company grow and build a lot of relationships over that time. But I joined LaserFiche from the financial services world. So definitely when you think of a stellar customer experience, maybe not always the first that you think of. And when I joined LaserFiche, I actually joined as a writer in our marketing department. And so really worked a bunch of different roles in the marketing department and then got the opportunity to start our customer experience team. And so it was exciting for someone who had been at LaserFiche for a really long time, almost like running a startup. Really got the opportunity to build the processes and procedures. And at LaserFiche was actually really exciting because we have such a big commitment to customer success and a really customer-focused culture, but none of that was really systematized. There weren't really any processes. It was just something that was sort of innate. So to bring in things like, hey, we need a customer onboarding process. We need NPS scores. We need a customer health metric. I mean, these were all things we sort of internalized, but nothing was really written down. So it's been exciting to build that culture. And LaserFiche, what do? We provide primarily SaaS-based enterprise content management. So what I like to say is like, think of all the stuff you hate to do at work and we get rid of it all for you. So, the things like trying to find information, filling out forms, not that we're walking so much information from one desk to the next now, but all of those things, making sure processes get done, and it brings a lot of value. And that's what's exciting, is seeing what our customers do with it.
That's amazing. If there was an easy button for everything that I did not like to do at my job, I would hit that button repeatedly. I'd pay so much money for that button. So sounds like you got a great market, a great niche
Yeah.
market. We've interviewed a couple people in the customer experience space, customer success space, and every time we ask them about their origin story, it's a little bit different. Everyone's kind of coming from different areas. And what we have found is this type of role is really, it can't be siloed into a department. It's not like, someone who's in the customer service department or someone who's in the, sales department. They really have to work collaboratively across almost every department, almost horizontally instead of vertically. So how do you guys, how do you work with the rest of your departments? How do you guys operate? Can you just jump into a conversation with sales and marketing and say, hey, this is what we're hearing on our NPS and our surveys. This is what we recommend. So how do you work? How do you operate?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of the other people I work with, we've worked together for 15 years. So I can't walk over to them and be like, hey, I don't like what, customers aren't going to like this. Can we change it? But we do work really collaboratively. One of my, not that anyone really loves meetings, but there is one meeting we have that I particularly love, and we call it the team customer meeting. So it's the heads of all our customer facing teams. So sales, customer success, me from customer experience, our support team, our head of learning and development, and our pre-sales team. So all the people that work with customers. And we get together and we just talk for about an hour every other week. And we talk about, like, what are the things we're working on that are likely to impact our other teams? What are the issues we're facing? Because we realized that we'd all, it was kind of like a blind man eating an elephant. We were all eating different parts of the elephant, but we didn't realize we were all eating an elephant at the same time. We'd all be working on different aspects of the same problem, but we'd only find out about it after we'd been working on it for a while. So we decided, actually, our head of support had this great idea that, why don't we get together and talk about what we're working on? And so it's really built a much more collaborative environment. And it's interesting when I talk to my colleagues and they're like, oh, well, I have such a difficult time with sales. They don't really want to hear from me, or development or whatever. But I'd say the person I work with probably most closely is my counterpart in customer success on our sales team, because we have to work closely together, because I may come up with the plans from the marketing side, but if our customer success managers aren't on board to really fulfill them from the sales side, then they're not going to work. So yes, it is very collaborative, and that's what I actually enjoy about it.
Yeah, what we've seen is the companies or the people that we talk to that have someone with like a title of customer experience director, VP, is that their company was very siloed before with all the different departments. And then they realized they needed this customer experience to be able to, get the support better, make sure the customers are happy. And then they eventually bring somebody in or take someone from a different, spot of the organization. Okay, you oversee it, but you're overseeing it over all these different departments. And it's really evolved in how that works. But one thing you mentioned at the very beginning was just how your company's always been very customer focused. Talk a little bit about the founder, the CEO that's since passed, how she helped craft this just amazing vision for the company and the culture.
Sure. So our founder, Nailing Wacker, Nailing was an incredible woman, and I was very, very fortunate to get to work with her pretty closely, even from when I first started. And Nailing, her idea when she started LaserFiche was that she wanted to create software that people love to use. And when she came to people and said, this is what I want to do, they were like, that's stupid. No one loves software they use at work. They use it because they have to. And she said that made her even more determined that she was going to create software that people love to use. And she did it. And I think it's because she always had this philosophy, and it was something that really I heard over and over and over again from even my first days at the company, was that you make the decision with the customer in mind. You don't make the decision because of money. If you make the decision with the customer in mind, the money will come. But if you make decision with money in mind, you're never making the right decision. And so that was something that's really been like drilled into my head from, my first days at LaserFiche. And I think it really has sort of permeated our culture. And you get, when I first joined LaserFiche, especially coming from the financial world, I was just bowled over because like, these people love this software so much. Like our conference, we were talking about this a little bit before we
Yeah.
started. So we have an annual conference every year, and it's kind of like half family reunion, half like religious tent revival. Like people are crazy about our software. And you think about like the software we use on a daily basis. Like, are you like, woohoo, I get to use Microsoft Word? It's hard to find software that you use in a business context that you really love that much. But our customers, they love our product. They will email me and tell me about like, hey, I built this workflow and I just want to share it with you. It's so cool. They paint their nails LaserFiche orange. They dress their kids up in LaserFiche onesies. And I think that really all goes back to Niling, because Niling was really, she was really good at talking to customers and like paying attention to them and remembering them. So she'd run into someone at the conference one year and be like, what are you going to do with LaserFiche? And they'd say, oh, well, we're looking at automating this process. And she'd be like, okay, I'm going to check in with you next year and make sure you did it. And the next year would roll around and she'd find this customer out of like thousands of people and be like, did you automate that process?
Wow. Yeah.
And, it's like, and they would be like, I can't believe the CEO of this company, the founder of this company remembered me and my process. And so just making our customers really feel heard and important and giving them an opportunity to influence the direction of our product, that was something she was really passionate about.
And customer experience is a tough space to fill. It's a hard job, it's an uphill battle. But specifically in the software as a service industry, it's even harder. You talked a little bit about the conference where you're meeting with your customers, engaging with them, bringing it to a personal level. What are the other ways that you're doing it? I think before the podcast, you talked a little bit about doing webinars. Describe to us how you're engaging with your customers and turning them into those, raving fans and promoters.
So we actually have a number of ways we engage with our customers. We have regular webinars that are, and they're not just on like how to use a product. We have like, I'm presenting one next month on how to be a leader in a digital world. So we tend to do a variety of different topics on like how to use a product, how to be more productive at work, thought leadership type topics that really help our users be just better in general, better at their jobs, whatever that part of their job happens to be. We also run regular user groups. And I think that's something that has been extremely successful for us, is giving our customers an opportunity to network with each other. That's one reason our conference is so popular. I mean, yes, the content is great, but it's seeing those people make the connections. And these are like friendships that they've gone over years and years and years. And that is something that really builds and deepens the community when you will show up at an event and it's like, oh, well, I know all these people that are going to be here. And I'm going to, of course, want to bring other people because this is a group of people I want to be around. We also run regular trainings. Right now they're virtual. We have our annual conference, Empower, which is in February. And then in the middle of the year, we have something we call LaserFiche Spark, which is like a mini conference a day, a couple hours where we focus on thought leadership, talking about the product to really keep the community engaged. So we focused a lot on pushing, obviously, everything virtual this past year, which has been really popular with our customers.
Yeah, and virtual, everything's virtual now, right? Like normally we could sit down in one of our offices, we're all local, and like record a podcast. How has that been, the moving to virtual, just for the employees at the company, and then also just working these events that are now virtual? Have you seen any big hiccups or things that like we're like, shoot, I wish we could go back as soon as possible type things?
Well, I don't know that I traveled a lot in before in the before times, so I don't know that shifting to virtual made that much of a difference for me, except I don't have to go to LAX anymore. But what I think has been really interesting in our virtual events, especially with our conference, which was just in February, is our conference is it's such a big event and people are just so excited to see all the connections made. And, as hard as we worked on it, I was concerned, like, obviously nothing's going to replace in person, but what will people be able to form those connections? And one thing I thought was really neat was I actually feel like the virtual deepened the engagement with the content a little bit more than in person. So the platform we used had the opportunity to chat during the sessions. And so we had pre-recorded our sessions and then did live Q&A at the end. And so the speakers were actually able to answer questions and participate in the chat while the content was running. So if someone was like, oh, what was that resource you mentioned? You could like type, oh, it was, XYZ.
Yeah.
But to see the engagement in the content was really exciting because someone would be like, oh, well, Melissa was talking about XYZ for change management. What I tried was this, and this really worked well. And then someone else would say, you know what, I tried that, but have you also tried this? And so that extra, it's something that I didn't expect. And in fact, our vendor actually said we had the most engaged audience they had ever seen in terms of the number of the engagement in the chat and the number of comments posted. And we actually in the survey got a lot of people saying like, even when we go back to in person, I really hope we keep that chat component because it allowed those connections to build that wouldn't have happened in an in-person environment. So I was really excited to see that our customers and attendees were embracing the virtual environment rather than being like, oh, well, I really miss, having lunch with a random person. Like we all miss that, but there are possibilities in, in the virtual world that don't exist in an in-person event.
Well,
Yeah,
it's not really good. It's not surprising with such a cult following with your product that everyone loves what you guys do, that you guys had the best turnout and the best engagement during your virtual events. But that's great. And I think it speaks a lot to the culture that was built internally and externally with your customers.
Yeah, I was
just going to say, as a speaker, it's really rewarding too, because I don't know if you guys present a lot, but you always wonder when you're speaking, like you look at all the faces and like, do they enjoy this? Are they absorbing it? Is everyone sleeping with their eyes open? Are they all checking Twitter, and waiting for it to end? But you can actually see the light bulbs going off and people reacting to the content. So that's exciting. Sorry, Artie, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, this is a good talk track. I didn't want to interrupt you guys. I agree with you guys 100%. I think the in-person, and Alex and I go to conferences pretty regularly. I usually speak at conferences, and you'll see people digged into their phone. So they're like looking down. They're like basically just listening to the conversation, but not really engaging. And I see that even more with these virtual conferences where people, they're watching, but they're also multitasking, and there's 3 or 4 screens going on, and they get the alerts that are like, Teams or Slack or whatever it is. So it's really hard to continue to engage with your customers. So speaking about that customer engagement, how do you guys measure customer engagement, or maybe some other KPIs that are different, things like customer effort, or obviously there's CSAT or MSAT, member satisfaction, and NPS. What are the KPIs or metrics that you guys measure to try to put into this customer health score?
Well, I mean, we, one of our products is analytics. So obviously we're very analytics based. It's one of the things when I look back on like my past choices, I think maybe not women's studies, like maybe I should have focused, had I known I was going to end up here, I maybe would have focused on something a little more data driven. If someone had told me so much of marketing would involve me, building pivot tables, I would have been like, no, what are you even talking about? And that's what I always tell people now, like, if you're going to get into marketing, make sure you brush up on your Excel skills and your statistics. So that being said, we do look at a lot of different analytics. Obviously, we look at product engagement. We look at, NPS, customer health, customer satisfaction, customer lifetime value. And one thing I think has been interesting, especially when we're looking at the organization, because again, as I mentioned that, we're a relatively new team, is we have to sort of look at the forest, not the trees. So we get a lot of, well, this customer gave us, gave us a 10 on our NPS and we're doing great. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, that's only one moment, one person at one moment in time. Let's step back and look at all the other metrics that have to do with this account. Are they coming to events? How are they using the product? Are they using the product? how are their renewal? There's just all these other things that we have to look at. And so that's been a big shift, especially as we have, become more subscription driven, that there's all these other metrics that we need to look at. It's not just one and done. We put the system in, and then we get support, and then that's all we really have to worry about. It's a whole new world as a subscription-based business.
Yeah, and are you guys leveraging a lot of different technologies to help with that, or do you try to consolidate and use one tool to pull in all of your survey results and also all of the data analytics about how they're engaging with you and your product?
So I would say yes and no. We are actually looking at our tech stack right now, especially as we, as I mentioned, there were a lot of things brought in when we were a newer team and maybe had less experience. So we're looking at and especially as we approach this more collaboratively. So it might be like, my team has one thing, customer success has one thing, our learning and development team has one thing. Does it make sense for us all to bring in one vendor where we can work together? Mm-hmm. So yes, we have multiple systems, but yes, we're also looking at how we can better centralize our tech stack to give better visibility across the organization.
Yeah,
which I think is a growing pain that's not unique to us.
No, and we could definitely double click on that, because it's for sure it's definitely it's evolving, and with technology growing so fast and changing so quickly, it's always going to be evolving, the tech stack, and how new things are coming out with customer sentiment and AI and how to measure that. And you talked about analytics with using your own product and being a analytics type company, is that there's so much data out there. What we're seeing a lot of is BI is becoming very important. People are hiring data analysts to go in there and really understand the data behind that 10 on the survey, and looking at the whole forest, like you're saying. So how do you see that kind of playing out? Do you guys have a BI team? Is that something that you're looking towards the future? Like, how does that work? Just finding the data and mining that data?
We do have a BI team, and our BI team is actually pretty great. I love working with them. With our conference, actually, that they built me so many different reports that I can use, where they're taking all the data that's fed into our data warehouse and then spitting it out in a way that I can, have the reports, pull it out in Excel, run my own data, run my own analytics on it. And so it's great. It's been great to work with their team, that team, and leverage their expertise especially in building Power BI reports, which I'll admit is not my first skill set nor my desire to do.
What about automation? Do you guys have any automation in place today, whether it's like self-service automation or bots, or maybe it's on the back end with some process automation? Or are you leaning more towards keeping everything more the manual human touch, because you are in such a hands-on type environment from a support standpoint with your software as a service tools?
Well, if you saw me get excited, it's because we do a lot of automation, because we have a pretty comprehensive workflow and forms automation product. We like to say we drink our own champagne. And I'm actually really fortunate that one of the members of my team is she has spent so much time interviewing customers and writing up customer use cases, that she has such a deep knowledge of our product that pretty much anything I'm like, can you build this? And she's like, absolutely. So I take a lot of advantage of her knowledge and skills. But it's kind of a combination. We do like a lot of the personal touch, and I think it's very meaningful to our customers. Things like sending out coffee or swag, to recognize, work anniversaries or birthdays or things like that. But we do a lot of automation as well. We've automated a lot of our processes, where just the things that don't require a human necessarily, but that are very time consuming. And the more we can automate, the better. And it's just been exciting to improve a lot of those processes. And I will say it gives me a lot more empathy towards our customers, because it's hard. It's hard to change. It's hard to automate a lot of these processes. And in particular, one of the processes we automated was for our awards, our annual awards. And we actually beta tested the first version of our forms, actually alpha, it wasn't even a beta yet. And I, of course, they were like, well, how do you want the form to be? And I'm like, well, just copy what we did with the paper form and that'll be fine, which is the number one thing we tell our customers not to do, right? And I don't know why I thought in my case, obviously it will work for me. And of course it was a failure. We went back to the old way, within like a couple weeks, and it wasn't because of the product, it was because of my bad process design. And so I always tell customers this story to be like, don't feel defeated if you're struggling with process automation, because it happens to everyone. So and that's another case for collaboration. Like, you've really got to work with every department when you're automating a process, especially some things that involve customer experience, customer success, because they touch so many parts of the organization, and making sure people have the right information at the right time, that it's visible to the people that need it. And those are the things where process automation can really help, as long as you're not like me and are just like, just copy what we did with the paper, it'll be fine. What could go wrong?
We all learn through those little mistakes, right? But I think it's a good point though. And like, process improvement is not an easy undertaking. And I think what's nice is that you can empathize with your clients, because that's what they're doing with your product. And so that's probably why the conferences work so well, because there's so much to consider when you're doing process change leadership, change management, all of that, right? Talk a little bit about, you mentioned before when we were on our phone call about a book that you were like, I think it was Tech Humanist, and how you kind of see like what that has, translated into your day-to-day, or how you kind of view technology and the human experience as well.
Yeah, Tech Humanist by Kate O'Neill. Kate actually spoke at our conference in February, and her keynote was extremely popular with our customers. And it's interesting because we've seen kind of a similar evolution with our conference, where we would talk a lot about the technology. And as our conference has gotten bigger and we've increased our audiences, we've started to talk more about the thought leadership and the soft skills, because this, when it comes to technology, it is the changing the people is probably harder than changing the technology. You can put in any system you want, but convincing the people to change, designing a system that people will use, being able to present your case to get approval. And that's what I mean when I say I empathize with our customers, because with all this technology that I'm having to build a business case for, convince people to buy, convince people to use, like, I'm having to go through all these steps myself. And, I'm like, well, at least everything I learn, I can now share with our customers to help them. But so we had Kate speak at our conference. And one of the things I really like about what Kate talks about is she talks about the human impacts of process automation. And that we often, design a process and we fail to consider the human impacts of that process automation. And that really it hit a big nerve with our audience, because especially those who were in IT who were like, wow, I never thought of that. And it's really easy for us to focus on this new technology. This is how it will improve things, and to forget the people that it's going to impact, whether those people are our customers or our colleagues. And so having that viewpoint that technology should help, not hinder, is extremely, extremely important.
Yeah, that's a great call out. I was working with a company who has a pretty large offshore team, and they have a back office team that basically handles all the things that are hard that you have to do manually. So it's the stuff that like the frontline team members can't do, that they have to like log into this weird, unique backend system, do 3 things and then done. But it's a very easy process to potentially automate. And after the automation was in place, there was very little change management around what are the people who used to do that process. I think it was like 7 or 8 people on that team. What do they do now? And these people have been doing it for decades, like literally have built their whole career around those processes. And now that it's automated, there's really not much for them to do from a manual standpoint. So what this company did was actually just elevate them. So they're in charge of the automation itself and making sure that it runs on a proper time. So they're running reports and doing more of the management and monitoring of it happening. But it was an interesting culture shift and something that the company had not thought about when they're going through that process. So yeah, technology affects people. It also affects process. So it's good and it's bad, but it's always good to repurpose those people for something else. Have you guys seen that with some of your customers, or have you guys seen something like that internally at your company? And if so, what's the example? Have you repurposed that headcount for something else, or have you seen people repurpose that for something else?
For sure. I think, one of the most popular topics I speak on with our community is change management. And one of the things I think rings really true for them is that resistance is not because people don't like you. It's usually out of fear of, will I be able to learn this? What will I do now? Where will my place be? How will my work change? And a lot of that resistance comes from just fear. Ling always used to say it's the paper security blanket that's our biggest competitor. It's not another company, it's people's fear of the unknown. They are comfortable with the way it's always been. They're comfortable with their file folders. They're comfortable with walking it down the hall to a colleague. They're comfortable with knowing how things work, and taking that away and putting them into the unknown is very scary. So what I've seen a lot of our customers do that has been very successful for them is actually exactly what you said. When you take away the manual task work, you're able to let your staff work on the things that are more valuable, customer service, those projects you never have time to get to. And one of my favorite stories is from one of our customers out in New York, and they used to store all their records in their old library. And the floor was caving in because they had so many file cabinets, right? So they were like, well, I guess we're going to have to build a new record center to hold all these file cabinets, and it's going to cost us like $2.5 million. And someone said, wait a minute, what if we digitized all the records? We would save $2.5 million, and we could take the old library, fix the floors, and they turn it into housing for low-income seniors. Oh. And then all the people who used to work in the file center, they now work in other jobs in the county, providing services to the citizens. So I think that's a prime example of what we see with our customers, where it's like someone comes in and is like, wait a minute. Just because like we always have done it this way, it doesn't mean we need to keep doing this way. And let's really think strategically about why and what are the benefits. Like, look at in one fell swoop, they saved their county $2.5 million, provided housing to a vulnerable population, and gave a more satisfying job to their staff that ultimately benefited their citizens. So it's a win-win-win-win. Can't argue with that.
I love that story. There was a company called, and you guys probably have heard of them, Zendesk. I actually have their canister, but they're a ticketing system, and they actually have tickets and inbound cases for their customers. So whenever a Zendesk customer has a problem, they go through Zendesk and submit their case and get resolved by the Zendesk support staff. And they had this interesting story where they had this ability to automate a very simple process, which is a password reset. So in Zendesk, if your password needs to be reset, you click a button, you get the two-factor authentication, yada, yada, yada. You could completely automate that. But what they had found is that even automating that for everyone would be a cost savings, but in reality, you still don't want to automate that process for kind of your higher touch customers, the people who have very high lifetime value. You want to give a little bit of a more personal touch. Something like someone clicks the password reset button, and then you'll get a text message that's more customized directly to you. It's not just a macro or some sort of link. And they realized instead of automating that, what they can do is supply people, they're based out of San Francisco, homeless people, a job, literally giving them a cell phone so they could use a cell phone for their own personal use. They could clock in whenever they want into the Zendesk app and respond to these tickets in the way that they should to respond to these customers. These customers were giving raving reviews. These people who are less fortunate in San Francisco were getting cell phones with data plans paid for, plus some benefits and hourly wages. So it was a win-win for everyone. And that's just a great example of taking something that you could automate completely and then still keeping it slightly manual. So amazing to hear that lots of different companies are doing different things to automate, but also not forgetting about the human element of it on the agent and on the customer side.
Absolutely. That's a great example.
Yeah, and stolen straight from Zendesk from their website. So I can't take any credit for it.
It's on their sales board. But like, so on the sales side, I think that's a big piece too, because you can focus on all the great features or benefits that any product can do. But really, if you help your customers understand and manage that change, that's where you're going to move the needle more, right? And I think that's why the clients and the customers like the conferences, because they can talk to peers on, okay, like this seems like a really big forklift to do all these things. How did you do it? Well, first I did this, then it's this, and you put a structure around that and a process around the change management. Then I think you see a lot more buy-in from potential customers on the sales side too.
Absolutely. One of the most successful initiatives we've created, it's called the Solution Exchange. And it's a website where customers will basically, they share their solutions with us. We write them up. And it's things like, in a typical case study, it would be like maybe 1 or 2 lines. It'd be like, and then they automated, their marriage license process. And then you move on to the next thing. Well, this is actually an in-depth, we're going to tell you exactly how they did it. And we're going to go step by step, and we're going to show you screenshots, and you're going to have it that you can look at and see exactly what they did. And we always say, we don't think it's going to get you 100% of the way there. No one can ever copy, things. Your situation is different than someone else's, but it will get you maybe 75% of the way there. You don't have to necessarily think like, what am I going to do? And it's almost like a menu where you can sit down at the website if you're in IT with one of your business counterparts and say, okay, look, here are some of the options. Let's go through it. Would you like to do this, this, or this? And it takes some of the guesswork out of it in terms of you don't have to start from scratch. And we also have a lot of those processes built into our software. So then they just are like, oh, I want to automate this process. Well, I'm going to go into the software and here it is, boom. And we can just start configuring it. So we really do try and make it as easy as possible. And that, I think that just goes back to a lot of our community spirit, where customers they'll say to us, like, I was inspired by someone on the Solution Exchange. I read it. This helped me. And now I want to give back to the next person so someone else can be inspired by me. And so that's, again, I don't, it seems so unique to our customer base that they are so willing and open. Like, I can call up any customer, whether I know them or not, and say, hey, your solution on the Solution Exchange, I have a customer who's looking for something like that. Can I share your contact information? Would you be willing to talk to them? I'll be like, absolutely, send them my way. I mean, just in the past few weeks, I've connected people with jobs, with potential solutions. And it's all because our community is so willing to just put their hand up and be like, absolutely, I'll help a fellow community member because, in the past, someone helped me.
Yeah, it's so rare, but I love it. And that's why your developers are the rock stars at the event, because they're getting like high fives and like fist bumps for all the people they've helped.
They are. And, our customers, like, we do have developers that are like rock stars. Our customers will come up to them and be like, oh my God, you built the group fields feature. This feature changed my life. And it's, and for our developers, this may be they sit and work on developing this feature and wonder, does anyone care? And to have customers come up and be like, I love this. And then to hear the feedback, these are things that will make our experience better. And then our developers will actually build them. And then the next year the customers come back and say, oh my gosh, you listened to me. And then they feel this ownership that like, I can actually influence the direction of the product because they care about me. It's not just Melissa standing up on stage and being like, we care about you. It's that I do feel, someone picks up a call on the weekend to help me. I need something and I can email someone and they'll make sure it gets done. I can talk to a developer and give my feedback on a feature, and guess what? It ends up in the product. I will show up at the conference and I'll sit next to our CTO and he'll talk to me about what I think about my experience with the product, and he will care. So it's just, it runs from the top down, from our CEO, Chris, and our president and CTO, Carl, all the way down to, to anyone else in our company. They really understand we put people first.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. And if you were to have a customer experience secret sauce, would it really be putting your customers first, or thinking in a customer first mindset? Like, how would you label it for someone who's probably listening who doesn't have a customer experience team or a mindset today? What's your secret sauce?
I think I'd go right back to what Nailing told me all those years ago, which is make decisions with your customers in mind. And that really goes to what we say today in our values, which is put people first. And we've remained very true to that, because when you make decisions with your customers in mind, everything else flows from that. And customers know when they are the center of your company. Customers can feel it. And customers know when they're the most important thing to you, and you can't fake that. So if I had to say what a secret sauce is make sure customers know that they're the most important thing to you.
Totally. And when I was working at a previous company, we were preparing to go public, and the CEO brought all the senior leadership into a room, and he drew 2 diagrams on the wall, and one diagram, it's like a gobstopper. And he said at the core, the middle, that's your customers. And then you've got your employees, and then you've got your, community around you, and then you've got your investors. And that's how it was framed out. And he said, my biggest fear about going public, there's so many benefits and good things about going public, but there's also some pretty bad things as well. His fear was that the gobstopper would be inversed, and it would be, shareholders would be at the middle, then it would be maybe customers or employees, then, customers, employees, and then community. And we would always forget about, or not have enough time, because we'd be focused too much on shareholders and profit and EBITDA, on all these terms that come across, that we wouldn't really care about the people who we're selling to or supporting, or the employees, or the community around us in our ecosystem. So it's really important to make sure that you diagram that out, and then you keep everyone's focus towards that sender.
Yeah, I was on a webinar last week with Fred Reichheld, who was the creator of NPS. And he actually said something very, very similar, that it's all about the customers, and it needs to start with the CEOs, and they need to make it clear that if it's about love your customer, everything needs to support that, your internal systems, your governance, and that CEOs need to be extremely committed to customer experience and to know their customers. And that our job in customer experience is to make customers say, wow, and to make them really have that smile, and to make them feel like they're, that they have these moments of delight. And I took a lot away from that webinar, especially he had a real big emphasis on smiles and frowns. Like, you want your customers to smile, not to frown. But that you need to impact everyone in your business to empower them to make decisions on behalf of the customer. And I think I think that just ties right back into what you were saying. Like, you need to make decisions on behalf of the customer, not on behalf of your shareholders, not on behalf of anyone else. And when you look at your customer, I think you need to look at all of your customers, because your employees are customers too. For us, we also have we have partners, our channel partners, they're our customers. And so we have so many different types of customers that we can't forget forget our spectrum of customers. We have to make sure they're all smiling and not frowning.
I think, to sum it up, I think Nailene has really left a great legacy, and the way that the company's structured, the way that culture is, and it permeates everything, the departments, employees, all, to the customer. And ultimately that's where all the successes come from. And you see the growth and how the team continues to grow, and how, like, looking to automation and looking into customer sentiment and voice of the customer, all those things, just to continually ask, is this going to be good for the customer at the end of the day for all these big decisions that you guys make. So one of the things that Artie and I like to do at the end of a podcast, because we are bumping up against our time here, is ask our guests, like, what's a great customer experience that you've had with a particular brand? And we like to focus on the good, because we don't want to knock brands on air, but it's harder to find the good ones or remember the good ones. So do you have any story or brand that you can, like, think of where you're like, they really wowed me and did things right?
I do, actually. So MM LaFleur, they're a clothing brand in New York. In fact, I'm wearing MM LaFleur right now. They are my favorite clothing brand, but they are, I would say, obsessively devoted to customer experience. They have a really unique model where they have a stylist that helps you select your clothes. It's very much their market is very clear. It's women who need to look good but don't have a ton of time or desire to shop. But what MM LaFleur, I think, has done really well is built a community around, and you'd be like, how can you even build a community around clothes? But they created a Slack channel. And especially during the pandemic, this Slack channel has been like my biggest outlet, social outlet. And I've made so many friends on the Slack channel. And it kind of, when it's so easy to, like, devolve into, I'm going to wear sweatpants and every day it's like, no, I'm going to wear my pretty clothes because I'm going to put a picture on the Slack channel so everyone can see what I'm wearing today. But despite, all the struggles of the pandemic, they have done so many things to keep the community together, doing launch events to show off the new collections. Even just something as simple as, just a couple of weeks ago, I was having difficulties with shipping, and I reached out to their channel manager on Slack, and she fixed it for me in like 3 seconds. And so that's why I talk about them all the time as the example of a brand I really love. I buy from them. I've been buying from them this past year. Like, I am personally committed to making sure they make it through the pandemic.
Some art, right? That's great. That's great.
Yeah. So I think they have done a really good job of living up to their brand promise and just delight, providing those moments of wow, even when I know that they are really trying to minimize their operational expenses to keep going during a difficult time. Yeah.
No, that's an absolute, I love those stories, because one, it's like, being in the customer experience, like, you're already looking at it with a critical eye, because it's like, what I do for a living, you better do it right, and like, to have a company like that can really create those wow moments, right? And be able to do that during the pandemic. And they're, maybe struggling, maybe not, but like the fact that there's so much brand loyalty where you're like, I want them to survive. I want them to make it through this so that I can keep buying and be part of this community speaks volumes.
Yeah, they're great.
Well, absolutely. I love that story. I love the surprise and delight that they're doing, and they're doing it in a very low touch way, but also makes you feel like you're part of something. It reminds me of Zappos and how they used to do handwritten notes. So instead of like like a survey, like an email survey, like, how did we support you today? It would be an agent literally writing a note like, thank you so much for your call today. Hopefully you enjoyed your, shoes that we just sent out. If you ever have any issues, feel free to contact us back or email me. And then they wrote their email address, and just sending that to the person or the customer goes so much further than just an email or just like a brush off to a contact us page if you have an issue.
Yeah.
But or like Chewy's with their pet portraits. I feel like one of the members of my team, she continues to buy in hopes that one day she'll get one of their pet portraits.
I gotta look that up. I have a dog. I
Yeah.
would love the
There
pet
you go,
portrait. So I'm
true.
gonna look that up.
Oh my gosh, if you haven't, they have like I don't have any pets, so I can't speak to it myself, but they do incredible customer experience with sending handwritten notes. I know when customers report that their pet has passed away, they'll send flowers and handwritten
Wow.
notes. It's just they're very, very committed to the customer experience in the same way that
Yeah.
Zappos is.
Oh,
That's
that's
awesome.
amazing.
Well, Melissa, it was an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast, and it goes so fast because I know like this industry and this topic we can talk about it ad nauseum. There's so many nuances to it, and we barely scratched the surface. But it was wonderful having you on. Thank you for sharing your time with us and just your experience and your stories. It's been fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was like the fastest 40 minutes ever. I could keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Melissa, so much for joining. And Alex, thank you for hosting or co-hosting with me. And we'll look forward to everyone else catching us on our next episode.
Well, that wraps up the show for today. Thanks for joining. And don't forget to join us next week as we bring another guest in to talk about the trends around cloud contact center and customer experience. Also, you can find us at adleradvisors.com, LinkedIn, or your favorite podcast platform. We'll see you next week on another Cloud Podcast.